program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, January 8th. Your readers today are
Ruth Nowotniak
and Pat Lamont. And before we start our formal reading, I wish you all a very healthy, happy new year filled with love, success, and peace. And for our forecast, mostly cloudy today, a high of 45. Becoming breezy late tonight with a couple of showers, a low of 40. Then temperatures rising through the 40s overnight. Breezy tomorrow with occasional rain, a high of 55. Saturday, a couple of showers beginning at midday. And Sunday looks like breezy and colder with a high of 34 and a low of 26. Our national high extremes, the high was in Alice, Texas, 87. The low was in Mammoth Lakes, California, -2. Ski conditions are not good anywhere, sadly. And our sky watch, sunrise today at 7:46 a.m., sunset at 4:59 p.m. And on the snow derby, Anchorage, Alaska is in the lead with 19.6 inches, followed by Buffalo. This is month to date, 1.3. But on the season to date, very interesting, Anchorage is at 35.6 and Buffalo is at 36.0. So the honor remains. And now to our front page news. New laws proposed to halt proliferation of ghost guns. Governor Kathy Hochul on Wednesday proposed new state laws to stop the manufacture of untraceable ghost guns being modified by 3D printers into homemade killing machines at increasing levels in central and western New York. With an hour of free time and a 3D printer, anyone can turn a spool of plastic into an untraceable lethal weapon. Hochul told an audience of anti-gun violence advocates, elected officials, police, and prosecutors in the West Hill Community Center in Albany. In a preview of legislation, Hochul will detail in her State of the State address on Tuesday, the Buffalo-born governor proposed a law requiring all 3D printers sold in the state to include software to block the production of guns and gun components. Hochul wants another law to require gun manufacturers to design handguns that cannot be quickly and easily modified through the addition of Lego-sized switches into machine guns capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute. Another law Hochul proposed would make it a crime to intentionally sell, distribute, or possess digital instructions to manufacture a 3D printed gun. Hochul proposed that all 3D printed guns should be reported to a state police-operated criminal gun clearinghouse database. Hochul said 3D printers have a legitimate purpose, but should not be producing deadly weapons en masse. A 2022 investigation by the Buffalo News found 24 videos on YouTube demonstrating how to make semi-automatic rifles fully automatic, including links to blueprints for 3D printed guns. The news investigation followed the May 14, 2022 racist massacre at Top Supermarket on Jefferson, in which gunman Peyton Gendron murdered 10 people, all black, and wounded 3 others. On Wednesday, flanked by members of the anti-violence group Moms Demand Action, State Police Superintendent Stephen James and District Attorney from New York City to the Capital Region, Hochul boasted that shootings statewide dropped to their lowest level on record last year and are down 60% since she took office in August 2021. But Hochul said ghost guns, firearms without serial numbers, are the fastest growing gun safety threat in our nation. She had said that there have been over 1,000% increase in the recovery of 3D printed guns, a form of ghost guns in 20 cities over the last 5 years. James said state police seized 136 3D printed guns in 2025. So if we're going to keep getting guns off the street in traditional ways through the iron pipeline, they're creating the plastic pipeline in their own homes. That's what ghost guns are all about. And it's an emerging threat. It's getting worse. If we don't do something now, it's going to undo all our progress because we're getting the guns off the street we can find. But those are almost impossible with them being made in your kitchen, for God's sakes. These are homemade killing machines, 3D printed guns and assembled with parts that you can just go buy online. You think there's a background check there? Heck no. No one's checking to make sure that you don't have a record, that you're not going to do harm, you're going to kill the person that you live with. James told reporters there was an increase in enforcement efforts against an increase in 3D printed guns, mostly in central New York and parts of western New York. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who attended Hochul's news conference, called the manufacturing of 3D printed guns the kitchen table pipeline. Bragg said if the bills became law, it would prevent many ghost guns from being made in the first place. I think the point is to have fewer cases for our district attorneys because there will be fewer guns made. Hochul stated, because if you can't make them based on the purchase of a 3D printer in the state of New York, the industry goes away. The National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action expressed concern on its website over Bragg's support for cracking down on 3D printed guns. The 3D printed firearm world is evolving. However, if criminals by definition are not following existing laws on guns and violence, it is difficult to see a public safety solution in layering more regulation upon those legally engaged in 3D printing. Adding, 3D printers enable citizens to create and fabricate for a variety of purposes. And yes, this includes the lawful construction of firearms for one's own use, a practice as old as the Republic itself. How much innovation and freedom are firearm prohibition advocates willing to sacrifice for their own illusions of safety? Judging by the latest panic over 3D printing, you'd have to wonder if the printing press itself would be safe.
Venezuela operation, both a blessing and a burden for Putin. The lightning U.S. operation to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro can be seen as both a benefit and a burden for Russian President Vladimir Putin, whose forces botched an attempt to capture Ukraine's capital and topple its leader at the start of Moscow's invasion nearly 4 years ago. The ouster of Maduro highlights another Kremlin failure to support an ally. Following the downfall of Syria's former president Bashar Assad in 2024 and last year's U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran. With the U.S. determined to establish control over Venezuela, Russia stands to lose a strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere, along with billions of dollars invested in its oil industry. But President Trump's actions in Venezuela are also causing unease in Western nations and giving the Kremlin fresh talking points to defend its war in Ukraine. In addition, Trump's interest in wresting control of Greenland from NATO ally Denmark also threatens to destabilize the alliance at a moment when the U.S.-led efforts to broker peace in Ukraine enter a pivotal stage, distracting its members from their efforts to support Kyiv and provide it with security guarantees. Putin himself hasn't commented on the U.S. actions in Venezuela, which his diplomats have denounced as a blatant act of aggression. Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's former president, who serves as his deputy on the Presidential Security Council, similarly rebuked Washington for trampling international law, but also complimented Trump on defending U.S. interests. Quote, "Even though Trump's action is completely unlawful, he cannot be denied a certain consistency. He and his team are very aggressively upholding their country's national interests," he had said. On Wednesday, the U.S. said it seized 2 sanctioned oil tankers linked to Venezuela, including one flagged to Russia in the North Atlantic. Since 2014's illegal annexation of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula that followed the ouster of a pro-Kremlin president in Kyiv, Putin has sought to justify his action by describing his neighbor as part of Russia's sphere of influence, where Western encroachment can't be allowed. Putin has argued that just as the U.S. would bristle at any foreign military presence in the Western Hemisphere, Russia sees NATO's expansion to its borders as a major security threat. He cited Ukraine's bid to join the military alliance as a key reason behind his full-scale invasion of the country. "We have made it clear and unambiguous that further eastward expansion of NATO is unacceptable," Putin said shortly before sending troops into Ukraine on February 24, 2022. "Are we the ones placing missiles near the U.S. borders? No, it's the U.S. that has brought its missiles to our doorstep." Long before the invasion, Russia tested the ground on a possible deal under which it would refrain from meddling in Latin America in exchange for the U.S. offering Moscow free rein in Europe. Fiona Hill, who oversaw Russia and Europe on Trump's National Security Council during his first term, testified before Congress in 2019 that the Russians were signaling their willingness to make such an arrangement involving Venezuela and Ukraine. Russia never made a formal offer, Hill told the Associated Press, but in Moscow's then ambassador to Washington, Anatoly Antonov, hinted many times to her that Russia would cede its influence in Venezuela to the U.S. in exchange for a sphere of influence in Europe. She said Trump's administration wasn't interested in the Russian overtures that she described as a hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, how about doing a deal offer. In April 2019, Hill was sent to Moscow to convey the message that nobody's interested. Ukraine and Venezuela are not related to each other. Hill said she did not know if the winds have now changed and whether there was any deal between the U.S. and Russia to swap spheres of influence in Venezuela and Ukraine. But she noted that many officials, including herself, who were involved in restraining Trump in his first term, aren't around for his second. She argued that Secretary of State Marco Rubio would likely be the only member of the Trump administration who would now resist such a proposal, but added that others, including Trump envoy Steve Witkoff, could have a different view. Who knows what Witkoff and others have been chatting about recently, Hill asked. Before Maduro was captured, AP reported Russia had started evacuating families of diplomats from Venezuela. When asked about the move, Hill said it could not be implausible that Witkoff gave Moscow a courtesy heads-up. Sam Green, a Russia expert at King's College London, observed that Moscow may have backed down on Venezuela in the expectation of the U.S. giving it free hand on Ukraine. "My worry is that it may be part of a tacit agreement by which Washington, Moscow, and Beijing agree not to deter one another against interventions in their putative spheres of influence," he wrote on X. Before the invasion of Ukraine, senior Russian officials had issued vague warnings that Moscow could deploy troops or military assets to Cuba and Venezuela, statements that the U.S. dismissed as bluster. Some drew parallels to the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Union had deployed missiles to Cuba and the U.S. imposed a naval blockade on the island. Russian-Cuban ties withered after the 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union, plunging Cuba into a grueling depression. Soon after his first election in 2000, Putin ordered the closure of a Soviet-built military surveillance facility in Cuba as he sought to improve ties with Washington. As tensions with the U.S. and its allies mounted, however, Moscow again intensified trade and other contacts with Cuba and sent warships to visit the island. Russia also invested heavily in Venezuela's oil industry, as did China, and offered Caracas generous loans to purchase top-of-the-line air defense missiles, fighter jets, and other weapons. On several occasions, most recently in 2018, it dispatched its nuclear-capable Tu-160 bombers to Venezuela in a projection of force. Military experts have said, however, that any attempt by Russia to establish a permanent military foothold in the Western Hemisphere would face overwhelming logistical challenges.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 16 minutes after the hour, and we will now go to our editorial. Much needed guardrails. Kids growing up today face a high-tech, fast-moving world. It can be dangerous, especially for those who spend a significant portion of time online. In the virtual world, kids often do not know who they really are playing video games with or against. The same is true of social media. Who exactly is trying to friend your child? It could be a real-world adult predator. Terrible possibilities haunt the minds of parents, grandparents, and guardians. As the first governor, who's also a mom, Kathy Hochul supports the new online privacy standards for young New Yorkers. It is a correct move and positions New York with restrictions that would be among the most stringent in the nation, as a leader in safeguarding children as they make their way through this technology-driven world. Hochul is expected to discuss the measures as part of her State of the State address on Tuesday in Albany. Hochul's State of the State will also include another well-timed proposal to make teen mental health first aid training available to all 10th graders in the state. The proposed legislation to create online guardrails would require parental approval to override the limits on strangers interacting with minors. It would also impose new restrictions on minors connecting with artificial intelligence chatbots. Hochul's plan first appeared in the New York Times with a follow-up by News Albany Bureau Chief Robert Gavin, who reported on the governor's recent visit to her alma mater, Hamburg High School, where she discussed online protections for children. Hochul spoke passionately about how minors approached through an app's chat function can be radicalized or groomed or even assaulted. The law that Hochul said she will support requires social media sites and online gaming platforms to expand their verification of users' ages, tighten security settings, and require children under 13 to get parental approval before making online connections. There are good reasons for these safeguards. Hochul talked to the gathering at Hamburg High about students who have been relentlessly bullied and lured into games that simulate sex and reenact school shootings. Horrible, horrible things. And even in certain games, there's features that entice kids to gamble with their parents' money. And I don't even know if parents know this is going on. Hochul also backed Stop the Online Predators Act, a bill proposed by Assemblymember Niley Rozick and Senator Andrew Guinardez. It would require children under 18 to receive the highest privacy settings by default, preventing non-connections from seeing their profile along with other measures. Guinardez sponsored last year's SAFE, Stop Addictive Feeds Exploitation for Kids Act, as well as the recently signed RAISE Act, the latter which now stands as the strongest AI regulation in the U.S. The industry was not pleased with either bill. That's good. It provides safe for kids as the teeth needed to protect children. In the memo for the Stop Online Predators Act, Rosick and Guinardes offered a shocking statistic from the FBI. Child safety experts estimate that on any given day, there are around 500,000 active online predators. These vultures require information on children by closely perusing vital platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, X, and Roblox, according to the memo. The prospect of children navigating this ever-advancing world of technology is scary, and the fact that the Predator bill did not make it out of committee in either house in 2025 is also alarming. Hochul's support for these measures, just as with other legislation she's backed to help keep kids safe, signals her understanding of the dangers children face as they navigate an online world laden with hidden traps. It's to be hoped that the state legislature shares this understanding and follows through.
Our Another Voice article is on public libraries. It's written by Sarah Potwin, who is the Executive Library Director of the Niagara Falls Public Library. When was the last time you visited your local library? Beyond books, modern libraries have become vital community hubs. In Niagara Falls, our public library offers genealogy research, museum passes, seed libraries, a tool library, fishing poles, notary services, passport acceptance services, and a makerspace for hands-on STEM learning. During the summer months, libraries provide free lunches to children. Libraries are democracy in action, places where everyone, regardless of income or background, has equal access to knowledge and resources. Yet despite serving nearly 20 million New Yorkers through over 7,000 libraries statewide, these institutions struggle with inadequate funding. Consider school libraries. The per-pupil funding rate for library materials has been frozen at $6.25 since 2007, so low that school librarians can purchase only one book for every 4 students. Public libraries face similar challenges. With current funding levels, many have reduced hours, delayed building maintenance, and limited collections. This hits hardest in underserved communities. The economic case for library funding is compelling. Operating funds allow extended hours, supporting working families who rely on after-school programs. When libraries can afford current materials and technology, they level the playing field for students and job seekers. Perhaps most importantly, libraries champion intellectual freedom. In a polarized society, libraries remain neutral ground where people explore different perspectives. The budget requests before state legislators are reasonable and overdue. They ask for fiscal year 2027, $181.3 million in state aid for libraries, up from $106 million in 2026. $175 million for library construction, up from $44 million, and raising the per-pupil materials rate to $11.33 from the current $6.25. These aren't radical increases. New York has an opportunity to demonstrate that it values education, community, and equal opportunity by fully funding its libraries. They've been making do with too little for too long. They deserve better, and so do the millions of New Yorkers who depend on them. Visit your local Neoga or Buffalo and Erie County Library to discover what they offer.
And our editorial cartoon today is from Creator Syndicate. It is one frame. It is a news moderator giving the news on television and a couple sitting at home listening to the news. And behind the moderator, there is a screen with a picture of Mr. Maduro, and the moderator is reading. At his hearing, Mr. Maduro said, "I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still president of my country." And the lady is responding. She said they should tack on 4 counts of perjury. Amen to that.
And now our first opinion piece is by John Crisp, who is from the Tribune News Service. Other than TDS, just what do Dems stand for? I hope that my columns reflect evidence and argument, maybe even proof, rather than partisanship. But if you read a dozen of them, you could be forgiven if you get the impression that my political perspective reflects the left more than the right. Fair enough. In fact, I've been accused of having a bad case of TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, more times than I can count. Driven by hatred of President Trump, TDS renders its victims susceptible to delusions so beguiling that they can't think straight. In other words, hatred blinds Trump's critics to his virtues. Trump doesn't go out of his way to make himself likable, and the idea that hatred of Trump implies a failure by Democrats to come up with policies of their own that are anything other than anti-Trump is just wrong. Here are 4 big differences between Democrats and Republicans that have nothing to do with hating Trump. Abortion. 2 years after Roe v. Wade was overturned, a Pew Research Center poll found that 63% of Americans believe that women should have the right to choose what happens to their bodies. And yet, in my home state, Texas, it's virtually impossible for a woman to obtain a legal abortion, even if she's the victim of rape or incest. If you think women should have reproductive freedom without interference from the government, then for this issue, your choice is the Democratic Party, whether Trump continues to control the Republicans or not. Guns. I don't presume to speak for the Democratic Party, but if you're among the 61% of Americans, again, Pew Research Center, who believe it's too easy to obtain a gun legally in the U.S., then gun control may be an issue where Democrats have more to offer you than Republicans. Healthcare. Regardless of what you think of Obamacare or Medicare for All or any other approach to health care, it's arguable that Democrats have shown considerably more interest in solving America's health care problems than Republicans. Republicans' efforts on this issue have never amounted to much beyond concepts of a plan. Climate change. Nearly every evening, the news has with a climate story: floods, snowstorms, droughts, melting ice caps. Of course, the fact that neither party has done much to combat climate change doesn't hide the huge difference between Republicans and Democrats on this issue. Democrats accept the Paris Accords, meager as they are, and are willing to try to limit greenhouse gas emissions. Trump has rejected the Paris Accords and canceled nearly all efforts to produce energy in ways less harmful to the environment. How committed is Trump to expanding the use of fossil fuel? Just last week, he took over and plans to run Venezuela, and he hardly bothered to mask his primary interest, which is access to the country's oil reserves. But that's not just my Trump hatred showing itself. It's what is actually happening. And regardless of how you feel about these 4 issues, it should be very clear that there are distinct differences between our nation's 2 parties that have little to do with Trump. Democrats stand for much more than hatred of Trump. Besides, it's worth noting that love is as powerful a motivator as hate, and Trump deranged syndrome is a 2-edged sword.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 29 minutes after the hour, and we will continue with our opinion pieces, next coming from Abby McCloskey of Bloomberg Opinion. The GOP's identity crisis is deepening even more by the day. This might be Republicans' last big year to get things done for a while, President Trump is in the second year of his second term, last before reaching lame duck status. His party is unlikely to hold Congress after the midterms if history is any indication. What do Republicans want? As 2026 begins, I'm not sure they know. Last year was the big push, the DOGE cuts, the reconciliation bill, tax relief, deportations, tariffs, securing the southern border. It was a 4-year term shoved into one. But it also feels too soon to ask, what now? But we are in a moment in history where time is speeding up, not slowing down, as the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife underscores. But what about policy on the home front? I called some Washington insiders for their take, a longtime operative. They want to win the House again in 2026. They just don't know how to keep it, a former Hill chief stated. The GOP are excited for a tax season when people get bigger refunds and Trump accounts start being seeded. In other words, 2026 is about the tailwind from the 2025 whirlwind. But is it just blowing in the right direction? More than 3/4 of Americans rang in the new year thinking that the country is going in the wrong direction. According to Gallup, approval for Trump is at 36%. Approval for Congress fell to 17%, the lowest in over a decade. Certainly, there's interest in the MAGA base in advancing an affordability agenda, and rightfully so, given that prices for housing, education, and health care remain high. The tax rebates in April will help. Trump accounts, too, are something new and fully branded to the GOP's benefit. But food prices have gone up partly because of Trump's tariffs. Reducing health care costs has been a thorn in the GOP's side ever since the party failed to come up with a convincing alternative to the Affordable Care Act a decade ago. Perhaps there will be a surge in bipartisanship around supporting working Americans. If there is bipartisanship in 2026, it seems more likely that it will represent a uniting of extremes, like the photo op of then New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani and Trump in the Oval Office in November, or the idea floating around policy circles to turn tariff revenue into stimulus checks, which is about as progressive as it gets. But it's my sense that it's hard to have a sustained agenda in the midst of an identity crisis, which the GOP is most certainly in. Contradictions in the modern GOP include extolling American patriotism while vilifying the civil service, obsessing over military lethality while disparaging allies, claiming to be pro-growth while restricting capital and labor, arguing against the deep state while mandating MAGA loyalty pledges, decrying the deficit while passing unfunded spending bills, embracing social conservatism while distancing itself from pro-life causes, and the latest military interventionism versus America first only. This all will take years to sort out. In the interim, there are other areas of low-hanging policy fruit that the GOP could advance this year. The party should create a national commission on children and families that looks at, among other things, how we are going to protect children in the age of social media and artificial intelligence. One example is to chase affordability the conservative way. Declare the southern border secure, it is, and the world at attention, they are, and relax the erratic restraints on goods and labor that are anything but conservative. Usher in regulatory relief. Get the schools performing again. Take a page out of the second-term Reagan playbook and use this as a chance for some budget control. Limit the federal debt to a percentage of GDP. Future generations will say thank you. Shouting about the radical left or Bidenomics is not a legacy, it's a reaction. Over the last decade, no Democrat has held more political power than Trump does now. So please stop disparaging previous presidents. Stop pitting Americans against each other. The political leaders who have risen above America's deepest divisions are the ones we honor. This year is our exceptional country's 250th anniversary. There's no better time for the GOP to make a change in direction.
And our last opinion piece is by Stephen Carter, who's from Bloomberg Opinion. Trump's last damage will be the steady erosion of norms. Although the first quarter of the new century has seen 4 presidents, it is doubtless Donald Trump who will most fascinate future historians. And with the first year of his second term nearly in the books, our stock-taking of the moment must begin with what has been most mashed and mangled since January 20th, the rule of law. It's true that Trump's whirligig of executive orders has exposed the fragility of the concept. He has dragged us down one rarely trodden path after another. When a president so often seems to act out of impulse, it's likely that government lawyers, far from paving the road, are in a constant struggle to catch up, which is relevant to the rule of law. First, let me draw a distinction. Scholars use the phrase rule of law in a particular sense to refer to the structure of the laws themselves, asking, among other questions, whether they are clear and publicly understood, and whether the consequences of violating them are well defined and applied evenly. Thus, for many scholars, if the law becomes sufficiently oppressive that it can be enforced only by fear and force, the rule of law does not exist. In our conversations about Trump, however, we generally address the question of whether he is breaking the law. That is, whether there is a formally adopted rule to which we can point that he has violated. Plainly, the answer matters, and when we find out more each time a court strikes down or upholds one of his endless streams of orders. And yet I think this is the wrong question. It's undoubtedly the case that the law binds the president, as it does the government as a whole. Indeed, to turn Oliver Wendell Holmes' aphorism on its head, the government should always turn square corners when it deals with its people. But when we ask whether Trump has broken the law, we are speaking less about the rule of law than about individual instances, many of which can be debated. The right question is whether he has challenged or even altered the public perception of the norms of governance, not the formal rules, but the general understanding of reasonable restraint under which the government should operate. For those restraints, one might even call the proper attitude humility, are crucial to the rule of law. And Trump, as president, has consistently ignored them. In this sense, he has shown little respect for the rule of law, and by forcing his supporters to justify or silently accept even greater violations of the norms of restraint, he is damaging the rule of law. Consider, for example, the president's pardon power. No one questions that the power is plenary. The occupant of the Oval Office can pardon whomever he likes for federal offenses. Thus, in issuing a blanket pardon to all who committed federal crimes during the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot, he acted well within his authority. Nevertheless, by including those accused of violence, even against law enforcement officers, he crossed a normative line, an understanding of how power is exercised that helps restrain presidents from abusing authority. If everyone simply accepts such a crossing of the line, the rule of law becomes that much weaker. Another example. I've long been on the unitary executive side of the argument over the president's removal power, arguing during both Democratic and Republican administrations that the chief executive possesses the authority to dismiss members of most federal commissions. Should the Supreme Court rule that way as expected, the justices will in no sense be violating the rule of law. At the same time, I've also assumed, wrongly as it turns out, that a president possessed of the removal power would use it judiciously, wielding it more like a scalpel than a blunderbuss. The more the power is used, the weaker the norm that restrains it, and the weaker the rule of law. Similarly, let's suppose the president possesses the authority to direct the Justice Department to seek an indictment of a particular individual. That only addresses the formal legal rule. But there's also a public norm about the way his authority is exercised. That is, rarely or never, and certainly not for petty purposes. That norm, too, should be considered part of the rule of law, in the sense that we share a popular expectation that the power will be exercised in a particular way. And that norm, too, Trump has smashed to smithereens.
Now we'll go to our business news. Low hire, low fire job market persists. U.S. employers posted far fewer jobs in November than the previous month, a sign that employers aren't yet ramping up hiring even as growth has picked up. Business and government agencies posted 7.1 million open jobs at the end of November. The Labor Department said Wednesday, down from 7.4 million in October. Layoffs also dropped, however, as companies appear to be holding onto workers, even as they are reluctant to add staff. The report suggests that the low hire, low fire job market remains in effect, with workers enjoying some job security, but those out of work struggling to find new jobs. The moribund labor market stands in contrast with data showing solid economic growth, which topped 4% at an annual rate in last year's July-September quarter, the latest data available. Economists say growth slowed but remained solid in the final 3 months of 2025. A key question for this year is whether hiring will pick up to match healthy growth, or whether sluggish job gains will eventually drag down the economy. There is a third possibility. Automation and artificial intelligence could enable already economic growth without creating many jobs. Further insights into that question will emerge Friday, when the monthly jobs report for December will be released. The number of postings in November was the fewest since September 2024, but outside that month it was the lowest in nearly 5 years. The figures provide some critical measures of the job market after last fall's government shutdown delayed the release of data on hiring and inflation. Wednesday's report is known as the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, or JOLTS, and provides key insights into the state of hiring and firing.
And now our personal finance advice column called Easy Money. 6 ways to simplify your finances this year. Managing money doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming. Still, about a third of Americans, 32%, felt anxious about their finances going into 2026, according to a new NerdWallet survey. You got this. If you focus on the little things and do them consistently, you'll feel great about your financial life, says Lisa Eaton, accredited financial counselor and founder of Firm Footing Financial Planning in Seattle. We'll make it easier and give you 6 ideas to help you think less about money this year. 1. Automate fixed expenses. The problem with adulting is there are too many decisions to make in a day. Alleviate many of those about money by automating the no-brainer expenses. You might already have your mortgage or rent come out automatically, but what else can you set and forget? Eaton says automate as many fixed expenses as you can to save time, thought, and reduce the risk of being late. Water, electricity, trash, cable, and phone are all bills better paid on autopilot. The next time you sit down to pay these, select the auto payment option. Use your bank's bill pay feature to keep them all in one place. 2. Automate your savings, too. What about the bill to yourself? You won't miss it if you make adding to your savings automatic. This takes about 10 minutes to set up a weekly or monthly transfer from checking to savings, said Robert Finley, a certified financial planner in Chicago. The same NerdWallet study found that 46% of Americans want to save money for emergencies in 2026. Start with whatever you can spare. Even small, consistent amounts add up, and once it's automated, it's completely hands-off. 3. Consider a high-yield savings account. As you build up your nest egg, a high-yield savings account is a good place to park some of your money. The best ones usually offer an interest rate higher than traditional savings account. Find an institution you like and feel comfortable with, and consider opening an account. A balance of $10,000 would net you an extra $400 per year at an annual percentage rate of 4%, for example. 4. Investigate index funds. If you have money you'd like to invest, you can keep fees down and your approach simple. Baseline advice on investing is most people do really well with low-cost index funds. Index funds mirror the performance of a stock market index, such as the S&P 500. When you invest in index funds, you're putting money into many companies instead of buying stock in just one. To get started, open a brokerage account if you don't have one. Pick your first index fund and automate $10 a month from now until whenever. 5. Sever a streaming subscription. All that paying yourself first may mean you need to find room in your budget. Are the Bluey episodes your kids have watched 16 times on Disney Plus still worth the monthly price? Can you cancel Peacock, Paramount Plus, or Fox One after you're done watching football? Eliminating one unused subscription is a good way to get an easy win. Review your credit card statement and identify one that's no longer adding value. Then cancel it. Try it for a couple months to see if you miss what you're missing. If it feels good, cut your subs down to just one for music and another for TV. One hot take to delete: DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub. Whatever app you use to order food. Not technically a subscription, but when a lunchtime delivery costs more than a month of Netflix Premium, maybe it's time to make changes. Consider just deleting the app from your phone. 6. Post something on Facebook Marketplace. Another 10-minute task. Find a few things around the house to sell, snap some pictures, and create listings on Facebook Marketplace. Has your Peloton bike mostly become a place to drape stuff? Are you over the antique armoire collecting dust in the corner? Post it for sale and see what happens. It's quick to list, but it can take a while to sell on Facebook. But when it goes, you'll be happy to have it out and the few extra bucks in your Venmo account. We bet you'll also get the bug to sell more stuff. Keep it real. You don't have to go big or go home in 2026. The advice is to set 1 or 2 simple but strategic goals over the next 12 months. Actionable examples. Think about starting a 529 plan for your child and setting up monthly automatic transfers. Set a goal to cut fun money spending without sacrificing all the fun. For example, instead of budgeting $100 for movies out, stream a relatively new hit at home with a few theater-style snacks. Take 10 minutes to explore increasing your 401k contribution or opening an individual retirement account. The goals you set clarify your priorities. With a plan in place, even a simple short-term goal, it'll make it easier to keep doing the little things right. I like those tips.
Yep, I think those are good ideas early in January.
Yep.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Aquilina Michael. Brinkworth Mary Nee Morrissey. Cudahy Dolores Nee Heavey. Desmoni Mary Ann Nee Rehack. Gilberts Geraldine Nee Kubiak. Haynes Joyce Nee Goff. Louis Joan Nee Sliz. Lotempio Joseph. Musili Irene Nee Zuba. Panzak Stephen. Sheehy Thomas. Twist Donna Marie. And on the national level, Representative Doug LaMalfa, a California rice farmer who served 7 terms in the U.S. House and was a reliable vote on President Trump's agenda, died Tuesday in Chico, California. He was 65 years old. He championed California farmers. Next, CIA turncoat Aldrich Ames, who betrayed Western intelligence assets to the Soviet Union and Russia in one of the most damaging intelligence breach in U.S. history, has died in a Maryland prison. He was 84 years old. And Michael Reagan, the eldest son of President Ronald Reagan and a conservative commentator, died Sunday at the age of 80. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555.
And now we'll take a look at our horoscopes, The Royal Stars, by Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for Thursday, January 8th. It's time of new beginnings and major changes. You're imaginative, diligent, single-minded, and motivated. You thrive in the arts or scientific pursuits. This is a year of new beginnings, adventures, and major changes in your life. And the stars will show what kind of day you'll have. 5 dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. And after perusing all of the months, it looks like every month is a so-so month with a couple of averages. Aries, 2 stars, so-so. Tread carefully at work today or with any task related to helping someone else or when dealing with pets because communications are confusing. Tonight, get organized. Taurus, average. This week, romance gets a lovely boost, except for today. Today, self-doubt, insecurity, and genuine confusion might cloud important issues. Tonight, be observant. Gemini, so-so. This is a poor day to ask for permission or approval from authority figures. No doubt their response will be, talk to the hand. Tonight, relax. Cancer, so-so. Steer clear of controversial subjects today because they will go south in a New York minute. Judgmental attitudes will make cooperation with others difficult. Tonight, be aware. Leo, so-so day. Don't make important financial decisions today. This is also a poor day to shop because confusion, deceit, and indecision are in the picture. Tonight, protect your assets. Virgo, average day. Play your cards close to your heaving bosom today. This is not the day to push boundaries or take a chance. Tonight, go gently. Libra, so-so day. Fortunately, you have a strong focus on home and family now, which is why you are best off hiding at home if you can. Issues related to your work and your health may arise. Tonight, watch from the sidelines. Scorpio, so-so day. Friends or members of a group might disappoint you today. This is par for the course because conversations are confusing, even depressing. Tonight, listen carefully. Sagittarius, so-so day. Be aware that you're high vis, which means people will notice you today. If you make pronouncements from on high, you might regret it. Tonight, be careful. Capricorn, average day. Avoid discussions about politics, religion, or racial issues today. They will be pointless and possibly unpleasant. Tonight, study. Aquarius, so-so day. Postpone financial decisions about inheritances, shared property, insurance issues, and debt until tomorrow. Tonight, check the facts. Pisces, so-so day. Today you might feel judged by someone. This might be the case or not. What is important is how you feel. Today has an element of deceit and confusion. Tonight, listen.
And today in history, in 1790, President George Washington delivered the first State of the Union address in New York City. And in 1815, the last major engagement of the War of 1812 came to an end as U.S. forces defeated the British in the Battle of New Orleans, not having received word of the December signing of a peace treaty. Also, a little brief, local filmmaker issues a casting call for Amazon Prime series The Romans. If you always wanted to be in show business, now is your chance. Corey Green, a local filmmaker who wrote and produced The Romans, which can be seen on Prime Video and on local streaming network SKOVU TV, is looking for actors. Those who are interested can apply online or attend the casting call on Saturday at Grain Point Studios, 1155 Niagara Street. More details about the casting can be found at skyovtv.com/romance casting. Video submissions are accepted. My dream as a writer and film director was always to be able to create opportunities for Buffalo talent. We are looking forward to hosting a Buffalo casting call for the Romans series, Green said in a news release. The Romans is a modern-day interpretation of Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar set in Buffalo. Green has directed short films and a host of music videos, commercials, and feature documentaries. The experience that was shot in the West African country of Ghana. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ruth Nowotniak
and Pat Lamont.
I had another few seconds. I'm sorry. If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Pat Lamont.
and Ruth Nowotniak. And we'll go to our city and region section. Our first article, family sues Depew school officials in vaccination dispute, barring high school senior from school. This is written by Sandra Tan, who's a news staff reporter. The mother of a Depew High School senior is suing the school district and Depew High School principal Paul Renzoni for barring her daughter from attending school due to her failure to get a meningitis booster vaccine. Andrea Billy filed suit on behalf of her daughter, Casey Ray, in state Supreme Court last week. The family's lawyer, Chad Davenport, said in a statement to the Buffalo News on Wednesday, this lawsuit is about protecting a student's right to an education and ensuring that school districts respect the professional judgment of licensed physicians. Casey has been excluded from her senior year for 3 months over a single booster shot that her treating physician certified may be detrimental to her health. Casey, 17, suffers from severe flare-ups of leg pain and has, in prior years, suffered from heart palpitations and fatigue. The family said physical symptoms started when she was 11, 3 days after she received her initial bacterial meningitis vaccine. Such symptoms are not recognized as a potential side effect of the vaccine by federal or state public health agencies. But Billy said the family is concerned Casey may have a rare reaction and submitted a medical exemption form signed by a licensed physician. Renzoni referred the exemption to the State Department of Health for a recommendation. Casey was allowed to remain in school while the exemption was being reviewed. The district received a letter from the Department of Health on October 9th stating that unstable leg pain or family history of altered immunocompetence are not listed contraindications or precautions to vaccination. The district's medical director agreed with the decision to reject the exemption. Casey was barred from school on October 16th for failing to meet vaccination requirements for school attendance. Renzoni informed the family that Casey could not return to school as a student at the start of the following week. When she showed up at Erie One-Bosie's cosmetology class that Monday, she received a call from Renzoni and was escorted out of the building. In a prior interview with the Buffalo News, both Billy and Casey reflected on the ordeal the family has suffered, with Casey being unable to keep up with schoolwork or participate in many events and activities unique to her senior year. Billy said she's been upset by those claiming the family are anti-vax, and noted that Casey is otherwise up to date on all her vaccinations. While Billy has been looking into homeschooling options to enable her daughter to graduate on time, Casey said she loves Depew High School and longs to return. A health department spokeswoman said exemptions should adhere to a particular list of immunization precautions or adverse conditions, consistent with nationally recognized evidence-based standards of care. Bacterial meningitis is a life-threatening illness that causes swelling around the brain. The Federal Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices states reasons to forego or delay the meningitis vaccine include allergic reactions to the vaccine ingredients or an individual suffering from other moderate to severe illness that would warrant a vaccination delay. When requested, the department provides a recommendation to a school regarding a medical exemption based on public health law and recognized contraindications, the spokeswoman said in a statement. Schools are not required to send medical exemptions to the department, and the final determination on whether to accept or deny a medical exemption is ultimately and solely up to the school's administration. The family has argued that the opinion of an individual patient's doctor should override broad guidelines. Davenport also said the guidance regarding the meningitis booster vaccine has recently changed. What makes this exclusion particularly egregious is that just this week the federal government officially updated its guidance to state that this specific vaccine was no longer universally recommended for all children, he said. The CDC now categorizes it under shared clinical decision-making, explicitly acknowledging that parents and doctors, not school officials, are best suited to make this medical decision. According to the lawsuit, Casey's medical exemption was signed by Dr. Joseph Riccioni, a licensed local physician and doctor of osteopathic medicine whose practice focuses on a more holistic approach to health care. The suit, which lists the mother and daughter anonymously as Jane and Susie Doe, is asking that a judge take swift action to address immediate and irreparable harm to Casey's education, particularly since Casey is turning 18 in June, at which point the immunization requirement ceases to apply. School districts, meanwhile, have received state guidance that says schools are not required or expected to blindly accept every medical exemption request presented to them, even if signed by a New York licensed physician. But Davenport, whose practice handles medical exempted cases, said for the district to continue enforcing a mandate for a vaccine that the federal government itself has determined is not necessary for the general student population is arbitrary, capricious, and legally indefensible. We are asking the court to reinstate Casey immediately so she doesn't miss another day of her senior year.
4 hearings set so sex abuse claimants can address the court, and this is by Jay Tokaz. Beginning later this month, people who have child sex abuse claims against the Catholic Diocese of Buffalo will be able to give a statement in court as part of the diocese Chapter 11 bankruptcy case. Chief Judge Carl Buckeye of U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of New York has scheduled 4 hearings to accommodate people who wish to speak, beginning on January 27th. The other 3 hearing days will be January 28th, February 25th, and February 26th. All are scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. in the Robert Jackson U.S. Courthouse at 2 Niagara Square, Buffalo. Hearings will be open to the public. Bishop Michael Fisher and other diocese representatives are expected to be present at the hearings. Oral statements should not be longer than 20 minutes and won't be considered as evidence in the official case record, court officials said. The statements must be given in person, although anyone who cannot appear may request to have a lawyer or other representative read a written statement in court on their behalf. Buckeye approved the statement sessions in December. Unlike regular court hearings, they will not be transcribed by a court reporter. Audio recordings of the session will be made, and the recordings will be sealed by the court, making them unavailable to the public or any party without a court order. Buckeye also will allow any person impacted by the diocese bankruptcy case an opportunity to make a statement. Those interested in making a statement should contact the official committee of unsecured creditors by January 15th by emailing diocesebuffalo-committee@pszjlaw.com or calling 212-319-5527. That's 212-319-5527.
Our Buffalo Next article is on startups. 43 North winners settle in with hiring on their minds. And this is written by Mike Petro, who's a news staff reporter. It didn't take long for 43 North's latest cohort of winning startups to hire and start seeking local talent. As the 5 startups that won the $1 million in October arrived in Buffalo this week, one has already brought on a recent graduate from the area, and the others are all planning to hire from Western New York in 2026. Joel Horsford, founder of Rad Employ, which is from New York City, just hired a full-stack artificial intelligence engineer who's a recent graduate of the University of Buffalo to help build AI-powered applications. Horsford's goal this year in Buffalo is to make a few hires, and he's honed in on recruiting recent graduates from local universities. 43 North's 11 cohort will move to Buffalo for at least a year as part of the Accelerator program, which provides mentorship, support, and connections to the Western New York startup ecosystem. In exchange, 43 North gets a 5% ownership stake in each winner. Other winners include CellSense of New York City, Cozy Care of London, Flow of New Haven, Connecticut, and Tukai.ai of Miami. I'm a man of my word. This is what we wanted to do, and we're doing it, said Horsford, a graduate of SUNY Oswego, who runs the staffing platform that uses artificial intelligence to connect radiology professionals with big hospital systems. The universities that graduate really strong candidates, we would like to get in front of those candidates and bring them onto the team. Right after winning the competition, David Deli of Flow posted job openings for mechanical and electrical engineering candidates who will help set up the company's new manufacturing line in Buffalo, and an account executive role, which will be the first full-time sales position for the startup that got going a decade ago. The new hires are expected to come from Western New York, and Dalal has spoken with some candidates to join the startup that offers a cost-effective and eco-friendly solution for ice and snow management on roofs. Aradhita Parasampuria, co-founder of CellSense, would like to hire 2 technicians and science and engineering interns for the startup, which transforms algae and cellulose into compostable beads that eliminate microplastics across the fashion and cosmetic industries. She's already spoken with Buffalo Manufacturing Works and UB to create partnerships to help in that effect. We were serious about our plans to move to Buffalo, and a big part of that was exploring the community, so we've already laid a lot of the groundwork, she said. It's incredible to see how the community here follows through and how the community really wants you here and is willing to support you. Cozy Care has made the farthest trip to be in Buffalo, so the London-based startup wanted to remain lean with just its 2 co-founders coming to Buffalo, but they plan to build out a team locally. The company focuses on medical devices offering itch relief and an alternative to scratching and infection management for those living with eczema or chronic itch. Co-founder Lauren Bell said she wants to hire people with a variety of skill sets, including an operational team, but how many will be determined over the next several months. The more time we spend here growing the company stateside, we'll start to quickly understand what we need, and we've got the means to do it with the investment from 43 North and some of the amazing connections we've made, she said. Ramira Robolos, founder of Tuki.ai, which provides immigration services in a corporate landscape, is taking a more careful approach to hiring. He said it is common in the startup world to hire a bunch of people after receiving funding, but then growth does not happen as anticipated. He'll consider making additional hires like attorneys, paralegals, sales, and marketing after several months of being in Buffalo. Even though his AI-based company automates much of the work involved in immigration, there is still a need for the human touch in the process, he said. Coming from working in big corporations, I've seen how it is easy to overhire, and then what winds up happening sometimes is massive layoffs, he said, a native of Argentina who moved to the U.S. in 2020 and went through the immigration process himself. That's a problem I don't want to incur. It's terrible for the employees that trusted you, terrible for the culture, and terrible for the company. Since the finals in October, Dalal returned to Buffalo a few times for meetings with 43 North clients and to discuss other partnership opportunities, as well as make future plans for hiring and manufacturing locally. This is the ideal time for Dalal to be in Buffalo because the area is one of the epicenters for snow and ice, and this is his startup's busiest time. I've loved getting to know the community already. It's been nice to get settled in. When we meet when we meet all the people now, ice and snow is top of mind. If we came here in July, it would be more like, okay, we'll talk about this in several months.
Poloncarz urges law to regulate biometrics. Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz is pushing for a county law that would regulate the use of biometrics by stores and businesses, days after reports that Wegmans was using the technology at a store in New York City. I find it very troubling that Wegmans and other retailers are using facial recognition and other biometric technology to collect data on its customers, he wrote on Blue Sky. I have directed my team to begin the process to pass a local law to prohibit such collecting of data and retaining it. No such local or state laws exist yet to regulate biometric data collection. New York City has a law requiring disclosure of biometric use. As someone who worked at Tops Markets and Sears, I understand the need to prevent theft. But this is a serious invasion of privacy that can have negative ramifications for a person just because they walked into a store, he said. Erie County legislator Lindsay Larigo said she would push for a law that requires companies using facial recognition or collecting biometric data to post signs about it at their entrance at the very least. This proposal isn't about stopping technology, it's about transparency. Every day we choose to opt in when we share personal information through our phones or apps. When biometric data is being collected in the store, customers should have that same knowledge. Larigo said the Biometric Privacy Act would require reasonable security measures to protect the data from unauthorized access or disclosure. The law would not apply to biometric data collected for employment purposes. Images or video could not be sold or shared with third parties except for lawful purposes.
You're listening to reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is approximately 16 minutes past the hour, and we will move to our sports column articles. And our first one is the Bills Notes article. That's a news staff report. Prater, pretty confident he can play. Buffalo Bills kicker Matt Prater feels pretty confident that he can get himself to 100% for Sunday's wild card game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, despite dealing with a right quad injury. I feel great, he said Wednesday. You know, I'm just doing the rehab and should be kicking on Thursday and go from there. Prater was officially listed as not practicing on Wednesday's injury report. The Bills held a walkthrough. Coach Sean McDermott said before practice that was the plan. We won't kick Matt today, Wednesday, but we will try and kick him on Thursday so we can kind of get a feel for where he's at, and hopefully he's good to go as of Thursday. Prater first injured his right quad in Week 15, though he finished the game against the Patriots. He missed Week 16 at Cleveland and Week 17 versus Philadelphia before returning to the lineup. He said he felt great heading into Week 18 game against the New York Jets, but that the cold might have been a factor. As the game went on, I just felt it kind of tighten up, and I think it was more precautionary. So hopefully we're able to go this weekend. Prater hopes the warm weather in Jacksonville will help his quad. He noted he doesn't heal as quickly at his age, 41, but he doesn't think that missing Wednesday's practice will have much of an impact on Sunday. The main thing is feeling confident after Thursday's practice. In the meantime, the Bills signed kicker Matthew Wright to the practice squad on Tuesday. Prater is aiming to help Wright acclimate to Buffalo quickly, just in case. Just watch him and be supportive, Prater said of Wright, and he asked me actually if I see anything to help out, but he kicked amazing. Other injuries. Help may be on the way for the Bills' defense with safety Damar Hamlin's return to practice Wednesday. Hamlin, a fifth-year pro, missed all but 5 games in the regular season because of a pectoral injury, and the Bills have 21 days to add him to the 53-man roster. A starting role is not available for Hamlin because Cole Bishop and Jordan Poyer occupy those spots, but the Bills' depth and special team units could benefit from an experienced player returning in the playoffs. Hamlin started 14 regular season games in 2024, totaling 89 tackles and 2 interceptions with 5 passes defended. He also forced a fumble and contributed a sack in 3 playoff games. In other injury news, linebacker Terrell Bernard, calf, cornerback Maxwell Hairston, ankle, linebacker Matt Milano, illness, wide receiver Joshua Palmer, ankle, and running back Ty Johnson, ankle, did not participate in the Bills' walkthrough practice as they prepared to play the third-seeded Jacksonville Jaguars, who are on an 8-game win streak. Hamlin, defensive tackle Daquan Jones, calf, tight end Dalton Kincaid, knee, Poyer, hamstring, and linebacker Shaq Thompson, neck, were limited. Jordan Phillips' return to the Bills' defensive line lasted only 1 game as the veteran landed on injured reserve Wednesday. Phillips' injury opened a spot on the Bills' 53-man roster, which the team used on cornerback Dane Jackson, who has spent this season on their practice squad. In other roster moves, Buffalo signed quarterback Shane Buckley and cornerback Daryl Porter Jr. to its practice squad. Jackson, a 6-year veteran with 31 career starts, will be needed Sunday for Buffalo's matchup with the Jaguars because Hairston has an ankle injury. The Bills elevated Jackson to the game day roster 3 times this season, but he played just 3 snaps on defense. Jackson will back up Christian Bedford and Tre'Davious White at boundary cornerback because of Hairston's injury. Jamarcus Ingram joined the Houston Texans on waivers, and Darius Slay choosing not to join Buffalo. Buckley left the Bills' practice squad last month for a spot on the Kansas City Chiefs' active roster, and he completed 7 of 14 passes for 88 yards in their regular season finale. Buckley is a close friend and resource for Allen, and the team prefers to have 3 quarterbacks between the active roster and practice squad. "It went by fast," said Buckley, "a little 2-week trip over there, which was fun. I was happy to play and get on the field in a jersey. Then the opportunity came to come back, so I'm excited for it." Porter Jr. spent the spring and 1 week of training camp with the Bills, and he spent most of the regular season on the Pittsburgh Steelers practice squad. The injury to Josh Allen's right foot has healed to the point that the Bills quarterback practiced in full Wednesday. Though the Bills held a walkthrough, it's significant that Allen did not sit out the team's first workout ahead of the wild card game. He was limited or sat out each of Buffalo's last 6 practices because of the injury that happened late in the second quarter of the team's win over the Cleveland Browns on December 21. Over his last 2 starts, Allen completed 64.8% of his passes for 392 yards, 0 touchdowns, 7 sacks, and 1 fumble lost. "It's the ultimate strain is what it is," Jaguars coach Liam Cohen told reporters in Jacksonville when asked about the challenge of facing Allen. "Because you're a dual threat. You have to defend the run and the pass every time the ball is snapped."
And Mike Harrington's column on the Sabres. "One game at a time, Sabres eye a new winning streak." Lindy Ruff has said repeatedly the Buffalo Sabres' 10-game winning streak was forged on a one-game-at-a-time mentality rooted in strong defensive play and efficient puck management. As painful as the cliche might be for this side of the pen, even I can admit he's right. You had to laugh when the coach walked in to chat with reporters following Tuesday's pregame skate and gave us a glimpse of his mood. "I said this morning, I'm tired of losing already. Gotta get back to winning." Ruff cracked a few hours prior to a 5-3 win over the Vancouver Canucks. The Sabres took on Ruff's assignment head first with a terrific opening 40 minutes that got them on a win streak of 1. They've won 11 of 12 and are on a 96-point pace at the halfway mark of the season. Now, they nearly frittered away a 4-0 third-period lead against the Canucks, but managed to survive in a game highlighted by Zach Metza's first NH goal, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's 32 saves, and Bo Byram's 2 assists. Ruff got his timeout call right, nailing it with 4:05 left after Elias Pettersson got the Canucks win 4-3. All I said is we've been in this position a lot of times already, and we're going to be in it a lot more times. Just play our game system is locked in. Be ready for it. We know we're going to have some strong wall battles, and I thought the execution after that was pretty good. We stuck with it, didn't lose any confidence, said winger Alex Tuch. So there's win number 1 in response to Saturday's clunker in Columbus. The Sabres are looking ahead to Thursday's game against the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden, and the Blue Shirts have been a disaster at home all season. They have the Eastern Conference's worst record at 5-10-4 and a stunning inability to put the puck in the net. New York has been outscored 60-36 in 19 games at the world's most famous arena, and that averages to an NHL worst 1.9 goals per game. Owing to the rink's location atop Penn Station, it's no stretch to call the Rangers a train wreck at home. And it's only getting worse. Goalie Igor Shesterkin and standout defenseman Adam Fox both went on IR on Tuesday and obviously won't play Thursday. Several Sabres have told me in recent seasons how much they enjoy playing in the Garden. It's one of the meccas of the NHL, and you never know which celebrity will get introduced on the Jumbotron during timeouts. The Sabres like the results on the ice there too, as they're 3-0-2 in their last 5 visits. Metsa played at Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut, about 80 miles northeast of the Garden. He was captain of the 2023 National Championship team that meet Minnesota in overtime to take its title. Metsa played for Quinnipiac from 2018 to 23 and wasn't there when the Bobcats played in the Garden versus Harvard in 2016 and Cornell in 2024. Getting to play at the Garden was one I had circled since the beginning of the year, said Metsa, who opened the season as a captain in Rochester. I'm definitely hoping I'll be in the lineup for that one. Based on his play in recent games, Metsa has nothing to worry about. As for Ruff, I'll break his code about one game at a time because I don't work for him. After the Rangers, the Sabres return home for a Saturday nighter against the Anaheim Ducks, who started the season 19-10-1, but are 2-9-2 since and have lost 7 straight entering Thursday's game in Carolina. You can't lose that one under any circumstances. The Sabres have to keep building their game. Their pace was back Tuesday, so was their ferocious forecheck, both of which were AWOL Saturday in Columbus. The clunker against the Blue Jackets could be seen coming from miles away, given its position at the end of a road trip and a couple days past New Year's Eve revelry in Dallas.
And some college notes. Canisius's Khalil Singleton earns National Weekly Award. This is by Markel Slaughter, who's a new staff reporter. Khalil Singleton, Canisius's sharpshooting junior, earned a National Weekly honor after becoming one of just 2 players in America to accomplish a rare feat. Canisius's 6'3" guard Singleton was named an Oscar Robinson National Player of the Week, the U.S. Basketball Writers Association announced Tuesday. He was first honored as the Metro Atlantic Athlete Conference Men's Basketball Player of the Week on Monday. Both honors should follow a performance that joined Singleton with Maryland's David Coit as the only players in the country with multiple games of at least 30 points and 8 3-pointers this season. UB transfer portal news. Multiple former UB Bulls have found new homes in the transfer portal. Junior Poyser, the All-MAC third-team defensive tackle, announced his commitment to Wisconsin on Tuesday. The redshirt sophomore from Brampton led Buffalo with 5.5 sacks in 2025. Former Buffalo offensive lineman Harry Tabansky committed to the University of Central Florida. He made 25 starts in 2 seasons. And former Bulls Victor Snow and Demetrius Ballard already have committed to North Carolina State and Boston College, respectively. The Damon Women re-enters the rankings. Damon's women's basketball team returned to the NCAA Division II national rankings at number 23. The Women's Basketball Coaches Association released their NCAA Division II coaches poll on Tuesday. Damon debuted at number 25 on December 16th. The Damon's men's basketball team is ranked number 2 in the nation. Coach Mike McDonald's Wildcats improved to 16-0 Monday with a 78-72 win at Franklin Pierce. Damon was led by a 20-point performance by Zach Filipkowski. And back to the NFL, the Ravens fire Harbaugh after 18 seasons. John Harbaugh's 18-year tenure at Baltimore included 2 distinct periods of success. After taking over, Harbaugh capitalized on the last few years of Ray Lewis's career, reaching the AFC title game 3 times in his first 5 seasons as coach and winning a Super Bowl. When Lamar Jackson arrived in 2018, the Ravens became contenders again, but there's been no conference championship yet for this particular era, and lately Baltimore has experienced more angst than glory. So Harbaugh is out of a job. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is approximately 29 minutes past the hour. And we will move to Asking Eric. Let me just find his little article here. There we go. Arrogant contractor makes housework more of a chore. Dear Eric, I have to work with a very arrogant person, and it is hard to manage his dismissive attitude and grumpy remarks. The thing is, I am paying him to do work on my home. He is a talented and skilled person, but his personality is very off-putting, as he seems to honestly believe he is the smartest person in the room, which is ridiculous. He acts like everyone else is stupid but him. Although he doesn't actually directly call me or anyone else stupid, his attitude says it clearly. Consequently, I dread dealing with him, but I do need his help right now. How do you deal with someone who isn't directly calling you a moron, but acts like you are one? I have come to believe he actually thinks he is being polite and helpful when his demeaning and rude dismissiveness is what is actually coming across. Signed, Respect, please. Dear Respect, you may not be able to change this guy's personality, which may be predisposed to arrogance and dismissiveness, but you can give him some constructive criticism relating to how the two of you interact. Try to pick one or two things that you've noticed repeatedly and address them specifically, rather than talking to him about his general demeanor. It is easier to get defensive and dismissive about broad statements. Instead, try saying something like, I want to give you some feedback about our working relationship, if you're open to it. I'd like to be able to communicate clearly so the project is successful. When I hear things like, here you'd insert a specific example, it sounds dismissive to me. Instead, if you're giving me an update on the work, could you phrase it like this instead? Adjust the language to suit your style, of course. The goal is to bridge the gap between intention and impact. Working relationships thrive on communication, so it's good to ask for what you need and to offer solutions for parts of the relationship that aren't working for you. I hope he's receptive and communicates his needs clearly back to you. If he's not, he may not be the best person for the job. Next letter. Dear Eric, to your excellent reply to Leftovers Anyone, who was a bit unsettled over her daughter-in-law's Friendsgiving meal mirroring her own Thanksgiving, I have a suggestion. My wife and I are the eldest of our extended family and often host Thanksgiving. This year, with my wife recovering from surgery, we had a dish-to-pass non-traditional meal, where I cooked the main entree, grilled dry rub flank steak, and everyone brought a side dish or dessert. We all had a great family time, and no one complained about the lack of turkey. Signed, No Turkey, Still Great. Dear Still Great, I love the potluck holiday. Many hands make lighter work. Next letter. Dear Eric, librarian here, replying to deleted post, whose son got angry about a parent posting news about the letter writer posting a photo of the son's wedding to social media. The letter writer wrote, I feel bad because my son seems to feel he can forbid me from sharing this news with my friends. I have noticed that many people default to owning their social media accounts and therefore the right to post whatever they like. Friends and family members will take photos or, sometimes worse, be browsing their old files and snap a pic of an ancient photo and share it online. Enthusiastic and informed consent is the way to go here. Show the people in the photo first. Before you post, ask, do you mind if I post this on whatever platform? Every single time. You don't own their faces. There are lots of reasons someone might not want a photo posted, ranging from it simply being an unflattering shot to future employers Googling their name, through to hiding from an abusive ex or being in witness protection. Even with privacy settings locked down, the terms of use that we all click agree to, usually without reading, give the online platform free range of whatever you post. The landscape is entirely different. The way we post and share must be too. Signed, Social Media Caution. Dear Caution, this is an important reminder for everyone. When it comes to someone's digital footprint, it's always better to ask permission than to ask for forgiveness after posting. And when it comes to sharing personal news online, it's best to ask oneself, whose news is this? If it's your news, you can share it. If it's someone else's news, even if that person is a child or close relative, get their okay. Or better yet, let them share it and follow their lead.
Xi tests Japan's Trump ties by upping trade battle. China is testing Donald Trump's support for America's top ally in Asia by imposing export controls on Japan months after the U.S. leader boasted he'd settled the rare earth issue for the world. Beijing turned up the heat on Tokyo this week by banning all dual-use shipments for military use, potentially targeting an estimated 40% of Chinese exports to its neighbor and threatening tighter controls on rare earths that underpin Japan's auto sector. Hours later, China opened an anti-dumping probe into a key chip-making material, taking aim at another pillar of Japanese industry. Taken together, the moves show President Xi Jinping's pressure campaign against Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi over her comments on Taiwan is just getting started. Restricting rare earths also delivers a direct challenge to Trump after the U.S. leader boasted he's resolved that problem during a meeting with China's top leader, which saw Beijing vow to keep sending metals vital to making everything from jets to missiles. For now, Takaichi appears to be weighing her options. While her government has protested China's latest actions, she so far refrained from any tit-for-tat response that would risk greater blowback at home, where Japanese car makers rely on Chinese-sourced inputs to produce electric vehicles. Japan's default approach to China's policy tantrum is avoid seeking a compromise off-ramp, but also to avoid any leaps toward retaliation, said Kurt Tong, a former U.S. diplomat in Asia who's now a managing partner at the Asia Group. Rather, it aims to patiently wait out China and expect it to calm down eventually. Bolstered by strong support at home, Takaichi has refused to retract her comment that suggested Japan could deploy its military if China tried to seize self-rule Taiwan, despite demands from Beijing. The dispute comes at a delicate diplomatic moment as Trump tries to preserve a truce with China, ensuring America's own supply of rare earth and ahead of much-touted April summit with Xi in Beijing. By contrast, the next scheduled opportunity for Xi and Takaichi to engage in leader-to-leader diplomacy is at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Shenzhen this November, meaning Japan likely faces months of economic pain. Traditionally, Japan's diplomacy has followed a clear pattern. First, you lock in the relationship with the U.S. and then face China. But the situation now is completely different, said Ryo Sahashi, professor of international politics at the University of Tokyo. U.S.-China relations are relatively good, so Japan can't use its old trick of negotiating with China via the U.S. anymore. There are really only two options left: either engage seriously in diplomacy with China or leave things alone for the time being, he added. Japan is keeping the U.S. in the loop as ties with the world's number 2 economy continue to fray. Just days ago, Takaichi said she had an extremely meaningful call with Trump and would visit the U.S. later this year. After curbs were announced this week, Masaki Kanai, an assistant minister at Japan's foreign ministry, spoke with his U.S. counterpart, and the two officials affirming close coordination, according to a Japanese statement which didn't elaborate on specifics. What Takaichi needs is a direct supportive message from the Trump administration toward China, one that clearly says Japan isn't in the wrong, and that also includes criticism of China, said Daisuke Kawai, director of the University of Tokyo Economic Security and Policy Innovation Program. China is also trying to rally support. Its export controls appeared carefully orchestrated to drive a wedge between Japan and the other key U.S. ally in the region, South Korea. Beijing unveiled the measures hours after South Korea's Lee Jae-myung posted for selfies with Xi during the first state visit to China by a South Korean leader since 2019. Those optics stood in contrast with the solidarity on display less than 3 years ago when the leaders of Japan and South Korea stood with the U.S. President Joe Biden at a historic summit at Camp David to inaugurate a new era of partnership to counter growing threats from China and North Korea. For us, relations with Japan are as important as those with China, the South Korean president told reporters in Shanghai on Wednesday, underscoring the balancing act facing regional partners as the dispute rambles on. If things escalate further, Japan has ways it can fight back. It dominates key semiconductor sectors, controlling as much as 90% of the advanced photoresist market. Export curbs in that area could cripple China's chip ambitions, according to Bloomberg Economics, which wrote that finding alternatives could take years. But Tilly Zhang, a China analyst at GaveCall Dragonomics, said the country's demand for high-end photoresist could be limited since it already faces restrictions on importing the advanced machines used to manufacture the latest chips. My overall sense is that whatever could be choked off has already been choked off, she said. Japanese companies selling a large amount of non-high-end semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China could get hurt in any serious retaliation, according to Zhang. For now, it remains unclear how China's export controls will affect Japan's economy, as a vague wording of the measures leaves Beijing plenty of flexibility. This is serious, but so far strikes me as further warning shot, not a death blow, said Corey Combs, Associate Director of Consultancy Trivium China. For China, diplomatic and economic efforts to pressure Tokyo so far have failed, said Wu Jianbo, director of Fudan University Center for American Studies in Shanghai. That means more powerful measures are required. We should restrict and suppress Japan's military capabilities and defense industry so as to deprive it of the ability to intervene on Taiwan, he added.
Updated guidelines urge less processed food, sugar. Americans should eat more whole foods and protein, fewer highly processed foods, and less added sugar, according to the latest edition of federal nutrition advice released Wednesday by the Trump administration. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins issued the 2025-2030 U.S. Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which offer updated recommendations for a healthy diet and provide the foundation for federal nutrition programs and policies. They come as Kennedy has for months stressed overhauling the U.S. food supply as part of his Make America Healthy Again agenda. Our message is clear: eat real food, Kennedy said. The guidelines emphasize consumption of fresh vegetables, whole grains, and dairy products, long advised as part of a healthy eating plan. Officials released a new graphic depicting an inverted version of the long-abandoned food pyramid, with protein, dairy, healthy fats, and fruits and vegetables at the top and whole grains at the bottom. But they also take a new stance on highly processed foods and refined carbohydrates, urging consumers to avoid packaged, prepared, ready-to-eat, or other foods that are salty or sweet, such as chips, cookies, and tasty, energy-dense products that make up more than half of the calories in the U.S. diet and have been linked to chronic diseases such as diabetes and obesity. The new evidence backs away from revoking long-standing advice to limit saturated fats, despite signals from Kennedy and Food and Drug Commissioner Marty McCary that the administration would push for more consumption of animal fats to end the war on saturated fats. Instead, the document suggests that Americans should choose whole food sources of saturated fat, such as meat, whole-fat dairy, or avocados, while continuing to limit saturated fat consumption to no more than 10% of daily calories. The guidance says other options can include butter or beef tallow, despite previous recommendations to avoid those fats. The dietary guidelines, required by law to be updated every 5 years, provide a template for a healthy diet. But in a country where more than half the adults have diet-related chronic disease, few Americans actually follow the guidance, research shows. The new recommendations drew praise from some prominent nutrition and medical experts. There should be broad agreement that eating more whole foods and reducing highly processed carbohydrates is a major advance in how we approach diet and health, said Dr. David Kessler, a former FDA commissioner who has written books about diet and nutrition and has sent a petition to the FDA to remove key ingredients in ultra-processed foods. The guidelines affirm that food is medicine and offer clear direction patients and physicians can use to improve health, said Dr. Bobby Mukkamala, president of the American Medical Association. Other experts were relieved that the guidelines didn't go against decades of nutrition evidence linking saturated fat to heart disease, but were critical of a sharp focus on meat and dairy as a primary source of protein instead of plant-based sources. Overall, if people eat the way these are recommended, they will be eating more calories, not less, said Marian Nessel, a nutritionist and food policy expert who advised previous editions of the guidance. The new document is just 10 pages, upholding Kennedy's pledge to create a simple, understandable guideline. Previous editions of the dietary guidelines have grown over the years, from a 19-page pamphlet in 1980 to a 164-page document issued in 2020, which included a 4-page executive summary. The guidance will have the most profound effect on the federally funded National School Lunch Program, which is required to follow the guidelines to feed nearly 30 million U.S. children in a typical school day. The Agriculture Department will have to translate the recommendations into specific requirements for school meals, a process that can take years, said Diane Pat Havener, spokesperson for the School Nutrition Association. The latest school nutrition standards were proposed in 2023, but won't be fully implemented until 2027, she noted. The new guidelines skip the advice of a 20-member panel of nutrition experts who met for nearly 2 years to review the latest scientific evidence on diet and health. That panel didn't make recommendations about ultra-processed food. Although a host of studies have showed links between ultra-processed foods and poor health outcomes, the nutrition experts had concerns with the quality of the research reviewed and the certainty that those foods and not other factors were the cause of the problems. The recommendations on highly processed foods drew cautiously positive reactions. The FDA and the Agriculture Department are already working on a definition of ultra-processed foods, but it's expected to take time. Not all highly processed foods are unhealthy, said David Ludwig, an endocrinologist and researcher at Boston's Children's Hospital. I think the focus should be on highly processed carbohydrates, he said, noting that processing of protein or fats can be benign or even helpful. The guidelines made a few other notable changes, including a call to potentially double protein consumption. The previously recommended dietary allowance called for 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. about 54 grams daily for a 150-pound person. The new recommendation is 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. An average American man consumes about 100 grams of proteins per day, or about twice the previously recommended limit. Mark Macari said the new advice supersedes protein guidance that was based on the bare minimum required for health. Officials with the AMA, however, called for more research on protein consumption and the best sources of protein for optimal health. The guidelines advise avoiding or sharply limiting added sugars or non-nutritive sweeteners, saying no amount is considered part of a healthy diet. No one meal should contain more than 10 grams of added sugars, or about 2 teaspoons, the new guidelines say. Previous federal guidelines recommend limiting added sugars to less than 10% of daily calories, or people older than 2, but to aim for less. That's about 12 teaspoons in a day in a 2,000-calorie diet. Children younger than 2 should have no sugars at all, the older guidance said. In general, most Americans consume about 17 teaspoons of added sugars per day, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The new guideline rolled back previous recommendations to limit alcohol to 1 drink or less per day for women and 2 drinks or less per day for men. Instead, the guidance advises Americans to consume less alcohol for better health. They also say that alcohol should be avoided by pregnant women, people recovering from alcohol use disorder, and those who are unable to control the amount they drink.
That controversy has been going on for 80 years.
Oh, yes.
And it still goes.
Still going.
But I think some good things are happening.
Yep.
Trump proposes large surge to defense budget. President Donald Trump proposed setting U.S. military spending at $1.5 trillion in 2027 on Wednesday, citing troubled and dangerous times. The 2026 military budget is set for $901 billion. Trump called for the massive surge in spending days after he ordered a U.S. military operation to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and spirit him out of the country to face drug trafficking charges in the United States. U.S. forces continue to mass in the Caribbean Sea. Trump also wants to take over the Danish territory of Greenland for national security reasons and suggested he's open to carrying out military operations in Colombia, Secretary of State Marco. The military just received a large boost of some $175 billion in the GOP's budget bill that Trump signed into law last year. Insisting on more funding for the Pentagon is almost certain to run into resistance from Democrats who work to maintain parity between changes in defense and non-defense spending. But it's also sure to draw objections from the GOP's deficit hawks who push back against larger military spending. And Rubio to meet Danish authorities next week. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Wednesday he plans to meet with Danish officials next week after the Trump administration doubled down on its intention to take over Greenland, the strategic Arctic island that is a self-governing territory of Denmark. Since the capture of former Venezuelan leader Maduro, President Donald Trump revived his argument that the United States needs to control the world's largest island to ensure its own security in the face of rising threats from China and Russia. Rubio told a select group of U.S. lawmakers it is the Republican administration's intention to eventually buy Greenland as opposed to using military force. The remarks, first reported by the Wall Street Journal, were being made in a classified briefing Monday evening on Capitol Hill, according to a person who was granted anonymity. Rubio told reporters in Washington on Wednesday that Trump talked about acquiring Greenland since his first term. That's always been the president's intent from the beginning. He's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how we could acquire Greenland.
And we will finish today's news reading with a reading of My View, Another Fond Goodbye to the Ralph. It's by Larry Zielinski of Elma, who's been attending Bills games for more than 60 years. Like so many people in Western New York, being fans of the Buffalo Bills has long been part of my family's identity. As a preteen, my older brother took me to games in the old rock pile to see my personal hero, Jack Kemp. We were there for the AFL Championship win against San Diego and the AFL Championship loss that sent Kansas City to the first Super Bowl. My father loved the Bills but never went to the games in person. I was shocked and surprised when he announced that he was buying season tickets in the old stadium for the 1972 season. His reasoning: I want to make sure we are on the preferred list when the new stadium opens. Back then, such tickets cost approximately $40 for the entire season. Many longtime Bills fans remember the first game at Rich Stadium in August 1973. I was at that game with some high school friends and spent the 70s watching O.J. Simpson and Joe Ferguson using our new season tickets. After I got my first real job in 1976, I took over responsibility for the tickets from my dad. After each game, we would gather as a family at my parents' house for one of my mother's famous post-game meals. We bonded over a love for each other and a love for our football team, win or lose. My wife and I are blessed with 5 children, all born between 1980 and 1990. By the time my oldest son was 5, I started taking him to the games. As soon as they were old enough, the other 4 kids took their turns using the tickets. Those were lean years, but we never gave up on the team, and were rewarded when Marv Levy and Bill Polian put together the Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith-led teams that went to 4 straight Super Bowls. By that time, my kids were older and regularly jostling for who would get to go to the games with me. We lost our dad in 1999. He still never actually went to a game, but part of his legacy was buying those tickets in the rock pile that cemented a family's tradition. I later lost my older brother, who introduced me to the Bills as a kid. At his funeral, I talked about Bills football as one of the foundations of our relationship. We survived the drought and are lucky enough to be following another great series of Bills teams led by Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, and a quarterback worthy of following in the Kemp, Ferguson, Kelly tradition, Josh Allen. We have grandkids now, 12 of them. I go to games with my adult children and a rotation of a new generation of Bills fans. My wife and I attended the last game on Sunday with my oldest daughter and her oldest boy. I, of course, had on my number 15 for Jack Kemp. Next season, we will move across the street to a fabulous new home and say goodbye to 53 years of memories at the stadium I will always call the Ralph. When I saw the initial prices for the personal seat licenses, I was admittedly taken back. But then I thought about my dad, my brother, my kids, and my grandkids, and the decision to renew became quite easy. Like countless old Bills fans, I have told my family that I will be going to games for as long as I can stay upright. Then I will pass our Bills football legacy on to a 4th generation. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, January 8th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Pat Lamont
and Ruth Nowotniak, and thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times business section. Following that at noon is the USA Today. Stay with us. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,